for quite a while, working from.
So thank you so much for your time, Andreas. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share screen with you so that we
Yeah,
can walk through about my research. And
yeah, that's good.
can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Might take a little
Yeah,
while.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
So my research is about the performance management in high tech and tech company. Uh, in particular, your case, I consider as a high tech engineering firm, the LMI technology, and the aim of my thesis and research is to understand how the tech company have managed their performance in different aspects. So I'm gonna start with the aspect that I believe you have the high expertise, which is R&D development, that's more technical, and for managing the any company really, not just for the high tech. We use the KPI, the key performance indicator. As you can see here, I'd like to get your view on the R&D project. So when it comes to R&D, as you can see in screen here, I'd like to get your view to rank them for me from 1 to 5. So they are unique number. It will be like
Mhm.
which are the top 5 ranking when it comes to R&D project for key performance indicator, please. So you let me know and I'm gonna just mark it for you.
Yeah. Let me see. So key performance indicator,
Oh, sorry.
market share,
Come to the
profit.
R&D. Here we go. Sorry. Here it is. So this
Uh,
one.
okay. You have to. Yeah, okay. So schedule variance. I want to work on time, costs, quality, reliability, return on investment, causes and risk factors in R&D projects. So it's difficult. Um, they're all
It
important.
is. They are all important. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it depends a bit on how you look at it. Also, like, so what do we have? We have one. We have ranking lists. So five is most important.
The talent process, I think I might have a little bit of prayer of here, here, and seven. Okay. Sorry that I
No problem.
actually give me a moment. Oh, sorry. Perfect. Yeah, apology for that. Yes, for the KPI here, you can see
So
the
one is the most
basis,
important.
yeah, the most
Okay.
important, and then it using is this is like on time and within
Mm,
budget and
yeah, yeah.
quality and ROI or
I
effectiveness.
think
Yeah.
I would give the quality a one because
Yeah.
it's to me that's really important.
Yes.
Even more important than being on time. Like on time is great when you're on time, but in reality, most of the time we are not on time. So
Yeah.
it would be hard to say this is the most important. So on time obviously is important. So I would give that maybe two or three, maybe a three.
Yeah.
Um, want to work within budget. Same as time, I would almost say. Maybe also
Oh,
three.
we want to do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Unique.
To
Okay,
yes,
then.
unique number.
Okay, then wait. The investments, effectiveness in education, risk factors, and the effectiveness indication. I think I would give them the return on investment
Yeah.
a two,
Yes.
and then the budget a five.
Budget 5, and then the
Uh,
effectiveness is 4. Thank you very much.
it's
So
difficult. I mean,
yeah,
it really depends on how you
you
look at
mean
it.
it's quite you feel they are quite equally important of the race, right?
Mhm.
Except from quality, I think. Do you feel that?
Yeah, the quality to me, without delivering quality, it's you don't have a good product, and then
Right.
everything else falls apart somehow.
Understand. So it quite stand out, and you think the other four, they are sort of, could be any ranking that they are all important.
Yeah,
And it quite align with the, I have fortunate to gather information, and I think this data set is around 62 data set from the participants who in tech and high tech engineering company. All of them have a lot of experience, and
mm,
quite align that the quality it comes first by far, and then the
yeah.
rest are quite similar, exactly what you mentioned there. Thank you
Hmm.
very much. And
Okay.
when we talk about R&D project that you're thinking of time and cost and quality, when you manage R&D, would you consider all of these three in managing the delivery of the R&D project?
Um, yeah, I think they are pretty equal in terms of. I mean, you have to consider them any time when you start a project.
Yeah, and
Mm,
I think the what we can call that the difficulty of this is how you can balance it, because you cannot get the quality by the time or the cost, I mean, and in which aspect, like LMI technology is such a company who produce the high-tech 3D sensor for very, very long time. So,
mm.
and how as a company perspective, or you asked on behalf of the leader and R&D and development, how you see the company manage the quality and cost and time, and how what's the process for them to ensure that they get balance about the three, because it's a consequence of that, if you like.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think in reality the quality should be the most important, but sometimes it's not, and the balance is off. So we try obviously to always produce the best quality, but in many cases we run out of time. So we don't look too much at the budget in R&D. So when you look at pure at the R&D department, of course there is a budget somewhere, but that's still a bit further away. So it's mainly about juggling around with resources. So having like how much work can we get done with the resources we have in a certain
Mm,
amount of time. And if we run short of these resources, then we kind of sacrifice quality.
right.
Um, but there is no, I mean, ideally we try to have this balanced out so that we deliver good quality in a
Yeah,
very short
yeah.
time and have a high return on investment. But in reality, the budget part of it is a bit further away from R&D because R&D often doesn't see the budget because they don't know how much money do we make with this particular product. Or
Yeah,
when we do like a project with a customer, then we obviously make a certain amount of money with that project. But R&D is a bit further disconnected from this, so they don't care so much about this. They believe that when they work um, fast and optimized, then that's good enough. But yeah, most of the time it's balancing between the resources, the amount of time we have
yeah.
available, and the quality we want to get out of this. And yeah, sometimes the quality suffers because we don't have enough resources.
Yes, yeah, the resources that to here. And I think that when you mentioned quite a few times on the short of time or short of resource to carry out and complete the project, I think in a way the consequence of that is as well that the nature of R&D project, they are very complex, and the to identify the time estimate, it's pretty difficult. So hence the reason that you mentioned a
Yeah.
few times of run out of time, run out of resource, and at the end you compromise the quality. And I'm wondering that in terms of managing the R&D, is it the team are seriously like have the monitor control process to ensure that at this stage it go further and beyond, it lag behind, and how to execute to get the time back or get to the progress where it belong. Do you have serious process of how you manage that R&D project? Because it seems to be a critical process that the delay and short of time, it tend to be a common
Mm.
challenge of R&D project, if you like.
Yeah, there's a process in place, of course, to like, basically R&D within LMI works with it's an agile development. So there are Scrum meetings, and every project is broken down into really small pieces.
Yeah.
And there are these regular meetings between the team members to get an idea, like, do we have any obstacles? Are there any roadblocks? So that's in place. So there is I think the difficulty is more when you start a project, it's very difficult to really understand the size of the project, because you have an idea how to do something, and when you just would proceed like this in a linear way, you can estimate how much time this takes, and that's fine. But often you run into roadblocks during the process, and in these Scrum meetings, we see those roadblocks, and then things get longer. And also in the Scrum meetings, then maybe tasks are being switched around, maybe to a different person, or maybe somebody helps out. So the resources are also shifted around a bit. But that's also difficult because we work on so many projects at the same time.
So many projects, yeah.
So we can't just say, okay, you have a problem, somebody else will start helping you right away, because maybe that somebody else is doing something else, which is also important. So, and then we have to see which project is more important. Which project can we shift a little bit to move the resources around very flexible.
Yeah, so flexibility is quite common here. So I think the
Yeah,
the biggest challenge tend to be that the time estimate is quite um, unpredictable in a way that uncontrollable, if you like.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. It,
So
it changes over time. Like when you progress into the project, the time estimate has to be adjusted all the
yeah,
time, because
and the
yeah,
time adjustable, that's very good point there, that it tend to be the common process as progress on R&D, time adjusting. And and the main reason for that, do you think that when we say point A to point B, then we press point C as well to adjust the time further? Do you think that the main problem perhaps you would name or feel, is it like a communication with the technical team? Is it the complexity of technical itself? Or is it, like a change in technology that you have to just learn more things and go to the next level of
yeah.
improvements? So what
It,
kind of the cost of every time R&D, not only
mm,
LY technology, that I see nearly unknown that the time is critical.
yeah, yeah. It depends. It depends. When it's a customer-driven project, then it could be that maybe from the beginning the requirements were not captured properly. So
Yeah,
then, maybe they change over time, because the project starts, and then the customer wants to have something slightly different than what was
yeah,
discussed. And then it's also quite complex, because then obviously also sales is involved, because we have agreed on something, and then we're changing it, or the customer's changing it. So that's also something which is
yeah, yeah,
it happens. But those things happen, so that the customer maybe needs something slightly different.
yeah,
Or if it's more in the product development, that we start developing a new sensor, for example, and then we find out with this particular lens or camera chip or component, we don't reach the goal we want to reach in a stable way, for example. And then we maybe have to change the hardware, we have to make changes, and that takes a lot of iteration to go back to a longer process to make those changes. So it is, I think, partly it is um, maybe because the the, um, the components change, or we see that what we had in mind, like the way we wanted this to work, maybe from the pre-study doesn't work. So then we made a wrong estimate.
Yeah.
Or during the process, that also happens, we find out that there maybe is a different way to do something, which we haven't thought about before, but maybe that other way is so much better than what we were
Yeah.
planning to do that we switch to doing it the other way. That also happens.
Yeah, I think.
So it's kind of also a learning process that we,
Yeah,
while
learning
we,
process.
yeah, while develop something, we learn more about the whole topic, and then maybe we take a different way to solve the application.
So in that case, the perception of R&D, it wasn't moved toward the delivery, but it moved toward the quality and the
Yeah,
innovation that we try to achieve, and learning is a key in the process. And that would
yeah,
be the drive on the time variation, isn't it?
yeah. Because in those cases, it's also that if we would have proceeded the original plan, the product maybe wouldn't have been good enough, and we foresee that then in the future we get more and more problems. So then we will spend more money on supporting it in the end and fixing it than what we would spend now doing more R&D work.
Yeah, so I heard about this quite a lot, that fix now then later, right? That
Yeah,
we see the
yeah.
problem now and spend on it, and I think on your aspect, I believe you mean as well that you see the problem now, and if you put this hardware or software at the customer, for example, then
Mm.
the problem, the magnitude of the problem will be much larger as well.
It is because it's way more difficult than to maybe the customer with the production line stops and
Yeah,
the customer is angry. There's no time to fix it. You have to fix it really quickly. You need a lot more people involved of the
yeah,
customer, but also of tech support. It's further away, so
yeah.
you like in every aspect that's more difficult.
Yeah, so hence the
Yeah,
reason that it's so critical, that why you iterate again and again and again until you feel that.
and because of course the other side of this is, and we also see this, R&D tends to never finish. Like
Yes,
when you leave R&D just doing what they do, they keep optimizing and changing because they want to have the best product. And they if there's nobody controlling this, then they will never finish it because
yeah,
they keep going on. That's also a problem. So
yeah, yeah,
at some point you need to make a decision like, okay, this is good enough. Um, and we can send this to the customer. And then you have to decide, is it at this point or do we still need to do more work or not? And that's also a difficulty.
and it's not that decision when it come about, and who make that decision is like yourself as the leader of the R&D team and development, or is it going to be the
It,
more senior, or who made a call on that actually?
it's mainly in product management. So
Right.
the R&D develops it, then it goes back to product management, and they see if this is good enough. And then also together with application engineering,
Mm-hmm.
who are close to the customer, who really know what the customer wants, they decide, okay, this is good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's mainly between product management and application engineering, so not so much R&D.
Yeah, I
Uh,
see.
R&D has a quite different perception of the whole thing compared to product management and app engineering, who are closer to the customer.
Yeah, yeah. And
And if it's a like a more generic product, like
mhm,
the sensor itself, and not a customization, then it also goes up to upper management, and they say, okay, this is what we had in mind. This is what represents our company as a product. This is good enough. But it's mainly in product management.
and I can see the gap here between the R&D team, like your team, and the senior management and the application engineer who directly
Yeah.
contact the customer. There seems to be a gap between the team, and you mentioned about the perception are quite different
Mhm.
because R&D is working in the workshop, laboratory, or the room writing software. And
Yeah.
but the R&D is the people who the team who actually develop that, and how you bridge the gap between understanding the customer and make the right product for the customer, and the gap between the team, and how you normally manage to minimize any communication or any misperception issue.
Yeah. That's and that's still we're not good at that. But in the ideal situation, this is product management. So the idea is that application engineering works with the customer and gets all the information. What does the customer need? This goes to product management, and they define what should this product what features should it have? How should the product look like? And they describe then to R&D what they need, what they should program. But they also should educate R&D on what exactly they expect from them. So there is this, because product management is very close to R&D. They communicate a lot, and they should be the ones collecting all the information, either directly from the customer or through application engineering from the customer. But they are the bridge between the outside world and the inside world.
Yeah.
But that's not working as it should yet. Like we're moving in that direction, but it is still difficult. So there still is a gap at the moment,
Yeah,
which
there's a
is
gap in
yeah,
for the
yeah,
department, that and the gap that trigger. I believe that, as you mentioned, it triggered the project to be more delayed because
yeah.
the R&D who do the work, you don't really engage and understand as the point, like application engineer who are work side by side directly with the customer, right?
We had this in the past also that, for example, a salesperson goes to a customer has an application, and he talks to application engineering, and there is a request from the customer. We need this and this feature. And then this goes to R&D. R&D starts to program a feature,
Yeah.
and this took like a few months.
Few months.
Then and then they finish this, and then this goes back to the customer, and the customer says, "No, but this is not what I need at all." And that's like really clear where there is this gap, and that's why there needs this product management to be in between to really understand like what does the customer really need, and then to explain to R&D like exactly what they should program, because R&D is so far away from the customer, from the factory floor, from the real world, that for them things that are very obvious to the people that are out in the field are totally strange to R&D. They don't see it in this way.
Right.
And in the past, when the company was smaller, R&D was more connected to customers. There was communication directly with
If
R&D.
larger, you have a department and
Yeah.
right.
So the larger the company gets, the more disconnect there is, and the more you need structures in the company to get this communication going. And the structure means that you have to have procedures, you have to have documentations. And I'm pushing really hard within NMI that basically for everything we do, there needs to be a documentation, because
Yeah.
a specification, like where we define exactly what needs to be done. Because otherwise we just start doing something, and maybe we are lucky and it's the right thing, but maybe we are doing something completely wrong.
Yeah. So I think you picture it very well, that I try to follow now, that it appears to me when you got the R&D project, you didn't actually receive a proper specification or requirement for the customer. You got passed on a concept idea what they want, but not specification,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and or maybe you just get a part of it, like you don't get the whole picture. You get a request, I need this particular feature, but in reality, the project is bigger, and maybe this specific feature isn't really necessary because you can solve it in a complete different context. But when only that one feature is being communicated, and only that one feature is programmed, and then maybe it would have been a complete different solution when R&D would have known the whole big picture of everything.
Yeah, and I can see the consequence of that. If you could clarify for that, for me, interesting point. then that when there isn't very clear specification, and the direct consequence is that the customer can always change.
Yeah, that's also a problem. So if it's not clearly defined towards the customer or from the customer to us and in between, then it changes. We have a case now also with a customer, and there's an integrator in between, and now they come back and say, yeah, but the customer wants this change and this different, and they
Yeah,
expect this,
yeah.
and we say, but that was never
Not
discussed, and
anything.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, and then it kind of never ends. Like it goes on and on and on, and those projects typically fail after a
Yes,
while.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
So that's a trigger for that. It's very, very great picture to hear like a reality and with direct experience of R&D manager like yourself. And it seems to be that you really understand the cause of failure. And
yeah.
that it, you really not only understand the cause of failure, you tend to really understand how to overcome that as well. Is this kind of feedback saying to the manager, to the team, saying we got to have the clear specification requirement on the whole picture of the project? Is
And, yeah, and this is really something to keep pushing for, because when a company, like a mid-sized company like NMI, it's now I think 400 people, which
yeah,
is mid-size, I think. Um, in a company like this, still a lot of people don't work in a structured way. They just do what they do. And
oh
when you look at really big companies like multinationals,
yeah,
there it's the other way around. Like everything is specified. Like you don't do anything without having the right document. And
yeah, yeah,
and
very
and we are
true.
kind of we're in between, like in between small company where everybody does do everything and you just talk, and a big company where everything is structured and there's a really big bureaucracy behind this. And we are in between, and we are in a bit of a transition phase. And that's, to me, that's even more difficult, because you need people in the company, typically the managers of the departments,
Yeah,
who really, really push and emphasize to the teams to really do the documentation and follow the processes.
yeah,
You have
yeah.
to repeat this every time, over and over again.
I I think this is a great point, and I appreciate very much here that it you remind me exactly what you said. Like you cannot change without getting the approval for change request. You cannot do anything without that for the
Yeah,
big company.
yeah.
I experienced that
And,
myself.
and that also, of course, makes a big company slower in reacting.
Slow,
So
yeah, yeah,
they're not agile.
yeah,
Um, and it's difficult to find this balance between being a small, agile
yeah,
company
yeah,
that can react really quickly and being a bigger company that's overstructured. So you need to have people, ideally, that are working on this balance all the time, actively.
yeah, yeah, and yes, it's a clarity and the speed that it's so difficult to balance and in your view and unfortunately that as you mentioned it's difficult to quantify for which one is better
Yeah,
so
it is.
so that you just like get project get going and iterating to the point where the customer will accept it and that the
Yeah,
process in the company right this is very insightful and I can see that phase is very very clear and so it appears to me that we walk through just R&D process and we can see that there could be every 360 angle that the problem could arise and then you can see the delay did it more time in the result in all angle so in that case is that mean that the risk assessment like the SWOT or the risk register is crucially important for any process
yeah, it is. It is. Because and I think you have to keep going back in circles and do these assessments and look at where is the project, how, like, are we on time, are we on schedule, where are the risks, like what can go wrong, how can we work around this. I think this is a continuous process.
yeah yeah
Yeah,
it is continuous. And how serious of the risk assessment implementation in R&D project? Is it like just a one-off and you start a project and just like not really very serious about that, and or is it strictly seriously monitor and control for each aspect of potential risk and
It,
severe issue all throughout the project?
it depends a bit on the project. In
Okay.
many projects, it's not done properly. It's maybe it's done once and then okay, we just go on. In some of the really large projects,
Yeah.
that's like with really big customers, there is constant monitoring, and there is also in general when it's a really large project
Mm-hmm.
with our key customers, then also the exec team is involved more, and more people are looking at this, and there is more risk assessment done in general. But in like for a regular project, it's not done on a real regular base.
Yeah. And who
Yeah.
decide that actually? Like this no such uh, a concept.
No, no, that's more like it happens automatically more or less. Like basically when we have a project with one of our like Asian huge customers,
Yeah, yeah,
then automatically more people are looking at this and doing the numbers, and so I think the trigger is really the size of the project or the customer. If
yeah,
it's one of these
yeah,
big key customers, for us it's consumer electronics, for example, um, then this is done automatically.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can see. So that's very, very rich on R&D, and thank you very much for information. Then we will move next a little bit on the project delivery. When it
Yeah.
comes, it's a little bit overlap here between R&D and project delivery, right? Like what we discussed. But in aspect of project delivery and R&D, in this aspect is the difference is that R&D is a product that not yet exists, but the project
Mhm.
delivery is oftentimes it produced and combined and built based on the technology the company may have, and then focus on delivery to the customer, not just inventing it delivered to the customer.
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
this aspect, I'd like you to share your view on the KPI, if you could, please.
Full on time project costs, variance, profitability. Yeah, I think the customer satisfaction is really important.
Yes.
I would do that at one. Delivery in full on time. I think for most of the big projects, that would be two,
Yeah.
really important. Because we have then, in those cases, maybe even contracts with the customer, and they need this to run their
Yeah.
production lines.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be on time. The cost variance, quality of project delivery. Um, yeah, from a technical perspective, the profitability isn't so important. I would also probably do at 5,
Yeah.
because we don't see that
Mm-hmm.
so much. Which is, of course, it is important for the company, but
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the and the cost variance would then be 4,
Yep.
and the quality would be 3.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So
Yeah.
you can see the idea here that when it comes to project delivery, the satisfaction from the customer, and it appears that you mentioned for them to satisfy is to deliver in full on time as a key aspect there, because they have commitment for delivery. And
Yeah.
we walked through that. You mentioned several things that potentially arise on the project R&D, and
Mm.
you might see in here the bottom left, bottom right here, the project failure reason. I think
Yeah.
you potentially name it nearly all of this
Yeah.
during R&D, right? Do you want to add something, or you
This,
think it's inaccurate?
this looks pretty good. Let's see. Inefficient team communication, inadequate resource allocation. Yeah. Incorrect time estimates. Yeah. Insufficient technical knowledge. Run out of funding. Inefficient literature research. Well, this is pretty complete. Yeah, this looks pretty complete. Like for example, trying like developing or maybe using the wrong hardware, wrong components, but that would be inefficient literature research.
Yeah, yeah.
So most of the things I could think about just fall into these categories somehow. So this looks pretty complete.
Yeah. And is it quite like it is practical? It's a real experience that you potentially have overcome, have encountered this problem yourself during the course of number of years on this field, right?
Yeah, we have done, we run into most of them. I think run out of funds, not so much,
Yeah,
because
yeah, because of
that's further away from R&D, and that maybe that happens, but
yeah,
that's then not so visible to R&D. That maybe when the project stops because management decides to stop the project, maybe it was out of that reason, but that's not
yeah.
communicated.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, no, but I think yeah, everything of that happened
Yeah.
in the past.
And
So
as the team, you mentioned like the conversation of delivery project, like you might talk to also the R&D like yourself, and I believe that you must have the project manager to deliver each project, depend your assignment and delegation. And if you
yeah,
could see the top left here, the quality or the five thread of the project manager, would you consider these in order, or you might have different view on the aspect of good project manager to deliver the project successfully?
I think this looks pretty correct. So you need to communicate to all the parties, the
Yeah,
customer, the internal parties, and that's the most important. And I agree that that's way more important than
yeah,
the technical expertise. Of course, he has to be technical, but he doesn't have to know all the details.
yeah,
He just needs to get an overview, and he needs to tie everything together, and he needs to know how to like who to ask
yeah,
about questions. So organize and delegate.
yeah,
He has to make the right decisions, and execution. Yeah, he has to push the project forward. So I think this order is pretty good.
yeah.
I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, thank you. And then, but of course, that when you work with a different team and a problem of the failure or the potential of issue come across, so and who actually is it the project manager or the team that try to how this problem can be overcome, and in which aspect of a successful project, for example, do you think what have they done to deliver project beautifully? And you must have seen several projects that come out of the box to the customer
Mhm.
beautifully and with a lot of customer feedback and things. When that happened, what did you see in such project?
Yeah, the thing is that the project manager, I think the projects that really work well
Yeah,
also show that the project manager has done his job very well. He has
yeah,
communicated very good to the customer right from the beginning of the project. So he was also involved right from the beginning,
yeah,
because often in the past we had the problem that they were not involved.
mm-hmm.
Then sales was driving the project
Yeah,
and communicating. So they were basically trying to be the project manager. And then at the later point when the project already was discussed and there was an initial plan, then they involved project management, which is not good. Um, so in a good project, I see that the project manager is right there from the beginning,
yeah,
and he actually made a really clear plan, and he also discussed with the customer the best solution, because maybe the customer wants to have a particular solution which for us isn't the best solution, and
no,
it's also part of the project manager to convince the customer that doing it in a slightly different way is better.
yeah,
And we see in those cases where he has done this,
yeah,
um, that the project typically goes much better than if he just would say yes to everything what the customer wants, and then in the end we have to do something really complicated, which maybe doesn't work. So I think it is really important to get them in there right from the beginning, and to have really clear communication and a really clear scope of the project.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, I'd like to go to the manufacturing at the last topic here. And at LMI Technology, because you have quite it, I think it's been between of the it medium, if you like, right? It's not small and it's not large. It's sort of medium. So, how the manufacturing process of medium-sized company, if you could have a quick overview and reflect back, is it quite reflect what happening in production or manufacturing process at LMI, please? Or if anything I might be missing and some advice would be greatly appreciated.
It's a very full slide. What I call suppliers develop. Yeah, but one big topic is changes, is customization for us. So our manufacturing is really tailored on mass production nowadays. So we can produce many devices of one product in a very good way. But where we really struggle is when we do customization. So when and technically we can do this, but the request process, the documentation process, everything that's kind of describing these steps, that's something which is difficult for us at the moment.
Yeah. And when there is a customized process reflecting back to the production or manufacturing, which process that mainly require big change when the customer require the customization, and that cause the consequence, of course, that the more complex of the delivery to the customer as well.
Yeah, the biggest difficulty is that like in the whole startup of the production. So let's say we have to produce a custom sensor for a customer. And it starts with the agreement between the sales, product management, app engineering, and the customer to go ahead with this. Then the part numbers have to be created, and then the work orders have to be created for production. And then it's basically for us doing like a customized product. We handle this as if it's a normal product. So the whole production process has a lot of overhead at the moment, which has to carry it around even when we do just a small number of customized products. And that's the biggest difficulty at the moment, that there is no shortcut to make this easier, that we say, okay, we produce products, and now within the existing production cycle, we want to customize a number of sensors. That's not possible. So we have to create a complete own production cycle just for these customized sensors, which is a lot of overhead for maybe just a few products.
Yeah. And in terms of quality, do you consider the quality in the process, and do you have the time in which the quality have a problem and recall, and how you minimize that happening, and is it possibility happening in manufacturing at LMI?
Yeah, there is. So there's production quality, of course. Every product is being verified, obviously, but that also happens within the production. So and they do catch most of the quality issues before the product goes out to the customer. But also the process itself. So there is also some monitoring about the production process, because maybe you can produce a better quality or more stable quality when you change the process a bit. So at the point where the quality of the products is being monitored, if they see that we have quality issues, then they go back and they discuss with the production or manufacturing managers, like how can we improve the production process to increase the quality.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's just like a training, like the person, the technologist who builds the device has to work in a better way, like he has to get some training. But maybe it's also an automated system that can be improved to produce more stable quality.
Yes, that's very important. And if you could help to, when it comes to like manufacturing, and
Yeah,
it's a big system here. You have operator, you have people, quality department, and production engineer and process engineer. And so it's a big process here. And what do you actually monitor your KPI when it comes to manufacturing? And we have the list here.
yeah. Um, yeah, so the quality, of course. Um, yeah, that's I would agree. Yeah, that's one. I would say so. The throughput also. The throughput is also pretty important, especially when we work with large customers. We have to deliver certain numbers. So, and that's also timing of product to market. So those two are very similar to me.
So maybe we
Or
may.
we're also a bit interchangeable. Yeah. Um, cash to cash cycle time, not so much. And so I would do the cash to cash 5 and cost of manufacturing benchmark to competitors 4. Yeah.
It appeared to me that because of the size or the stage of the company, I think that your company is very profitable. So it doesn't really much worry about the cash and profit. Is this because of it is because of the company are very liquid in cash, or is it the aspect of R&D wasn't involved very much on the financial, so that do you
I,
think that what was it come about? Because I noticed that some company the cash is king, and for them
yeah.
it affect every process. Um,
No, I think it's different things. It's partly because we have still a very good margin on the products, so we have some space to move around, and I think we do believe that to deliver a certain quality, you cannot just purely look at the cash. Like, of course, like we look at the sensors. The sensor, you could make a sensor in a plastic housing and casted housing, which would be a lot cheaper, but that would go against the quality. So I think in the market where we are, the quality is more important than the cash, and reducing or getting cheaper in production or in general um, is not good for the quality. So I think, and that's a bit of a balance we have.
yes. So if you look at the picture here about the balance between the quality and cost and time, it appears to me that it drive toward the quality, right? And
Yeah,
that drive, you mentioned one thing that why the drive come along because of the market target of LMI technology sensor is
yeah,
is a premium customer in which I believe the manufacturing that's
mhm,
running 24 hours and that drive to the quality crucial and
yeah,
important when it comes to manufacturing, right?
yeah. And I think it's very different when you, let's say you produce 2D cameras and a camera, and you sell the camera for 800 euros or 1,000 euros. Then you have a product where the cash or the cost is really important because you have a really low margin. But for us, having sensors which we sell for 15,000 or 20,000 euros, and we produce them for a lot less, obviously. We have a really good margin, so we don't have to be so careful with this. Of course, we try to be as profitable as possible and reduce the cost of the product, but we're not pushing that extremely hard. Yeah.
I can see that quite clearly. And so when it comes to now, we have the three checkbox here and the manufacturing process. And how much involved in terms of the communication, because the manufacturing tend to be part of the R&D, of course, the outcome of R&D, and it also involves the product and project delivery, and how communication, across the wider organization, and how you ensure the communication could have been done effectively.
And communication between manufacturing
All
and R&D
departments,
folks.
because
Yeah,
it's a medium-sized company. You
yeah,
start to be
yeah.
400 people now and more, and you got the R&D and outcome and manufacturing. And do you have any specific tools or technology, or it's just a pure effective communication for discipline, or what is tech for great
It's
communication?
it's mainly driven by forecasting from sales actually. So
Yeah,
the manufacturing, for them, one of the most important inputs is information from sales, what
yeah,
they expect to sell, because then they can stock components, they can plan to produce
yeah,
sensors, and that goes to our ERP system.
yeah,
So the sales put in their forecasting in the ERP system, and out of this, manufacturing compiles information about how many products to stock, what do they expect to produce,
yeah.
how many people do they maybe need to hire to produce, and so on. That's one thing. Then between R&D and manufacturing, there's a complete department in between. So we have a manufacturing R&D,
Yeah,
which is responsible. So let's say R&D produces or develops a new product, then manufacturing R&D has to produce the production machinery for this.
mm,
So, and they work really close. Like this is an interface between R&D and manufacturing. They work really close with both groups to understand what does it take to produce this new product, and also with manufacturing, how can this be done in the best way, and then they produce the machinery for this and the software and the workflows and everything. So there is a complete department in between that just interfaces between those two groups.
right, right.
It's like a new production introduction group basically.
Mm. It is very insightful information from you for different model, and thank you so much. And you mentioned the ERP system. I think that as the bigger side of the company, you can afford to bring on a technology uh, to department, right? So it helps
Yeah.
communication to become more online and connect
Y-
everyone together.
Yeah, and it's all linked up. So what we learned is that you cannot just use one system. You need to have multiple systems,
Okay.
but you have to connect those systems. So we use NetSuite as an ERP system,
Yeah.
and we link this up to Jira. Like R&D is using Jira, engineering uses Jira. We use some PLM system for manufacturing, and they're all connected.
Yeah.
So every group works basically in their own system,
Mm-hmm.
but every group can pull information about the other groups out of the system because it's connected.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That's very
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah, and that's an ongoing process
Yes.
to improve this, because the problem, and that's what we also saw when you are a smaller company, you maybe have one ERP system and you
Yeah.
do everything in this.
Yes.
And but it doesn't fit for R&D, for example.
Yeah.
R&D needs a different system like Jira, and but still they need some information about sales.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Either you give them access to all the systems, and then everybody has to access 5 different systems, which is difficult. And that's why having those systems connected and displaying just the right information to the different groups is the better way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you so much for your valuable time. I know how busy you are, and it's very helpful to me. And I learned here for a different side, a different stage of the company. I think my technology is very well established and in many ways in terms of quality and also I learned they are different in a way from the other smaller high tech company. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for your insightful information here. And so I'm wondering, Andrea, that would you able to know like the other part of like risk management and other aspect of the company, and would you have your view on that? If I send you the spreadsheet and thing, would you be able to um,
Yeah, yeah, I can do that.
Oh,
I can have a look at
yeah,
that.
thank you so much. That will be very helpful so that my questionnaire can be completed and it will be very helpful for me to get more data of because of I don't have much of the medium-sized company like LMI. A lot of my data set is quite either startup or could
Mhm.
be a large company and things like that. And this is another new information that's
Yeah.
something that I'm very interested to hear.
Mhm.
And so I'm gonna send you that with a consent form that and be ensure that your identity will not be disclosed so that you will be a one participant in tech engineering firm. So thank you so much, Andrew. So hopefully the COVID passed, you got job and you can travel again.
Yeah,
The world is
yeah.
back and you can enjoy as much as you have been in the past. All right.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.